Alright, hello everyone and welcome to AEW Discussion. I'm your host and AEW enthusiast Doug, and today's episode I'm going to be discussing Dynamite July 5th, 2023 edition. So just like WWE Discussion earlier in the week, AEW Discussion is getting a makeover as well too, starting over at 1. So generally speaking, this is going to be about the same. The makeover, I think, extended to from WWE Discussion to AEW Discussion. So basically AEW Discussion is getting a makeover alongside of WWE Discussion, so that is what you are seeing here. We are starting over back at 1 at the AEW Discussion. And as for this episode of Dynamite, the July 5th one, the Blind Eliminator Tag Team Tournament would kick off with a couple of matches in that tournament. Now, I don't really care too much for this tournament. I don't really care too much for random tag teams being thrown together, but it did produce a couple of good matches and some harmless fun overall, so can't really complain about it too much. And with that, we'll go ahead and get right into the action, starting with Darby Allin and Orange Cassidy versus Keith Lee and Swerve Strickland. So this was a good, fast-paced match that saw the continued in-ring chemistry of Cassidy, Allin, and Strickland, this time adding the power-based offense of Lee, which fans in Edmonton seemed to be into. It worked, and everything in this match seemed to work out well, and the result was a strong match to kick off the broadcast and set the tone for what appears to be the AEW's version of the old Battle Bowl gimmick from WCW. I know nothing about that, but apparently that's a comparison I saw, so I'm going to throw it in there nonetheless. Allin and Cassidy advance, while Lee and Strickland, former tag team champions, do not. Be quite curious to see how far this team of Allin and Cassidy go. So then you have a Chris Jericho promo, and he was offered by Don Callis to join his family, to which he said maybe. So the unanswered question from Jericho creates a cliffhanger that might create some renewed interest in Jericho after he has become somewhat stale. It could also put him in the middle of the feud between Callis and the Elite, which is a smart way to use Jericho at the moment as he finds ways to both reinvent himself and remain relevant. And this is either going to end with him saying yes to Callis, or perhaps saying no. So, as you can see on the screen, couple questions: does he join does he join Don Callis' family, or does he say no, and as a result becoming a good guy because Don Callis is so disliked? I guess we shall see how that one plays out for Jericho. Interesting backstage interaction he had with Garcia and Guevara, telling those guys that eventually they're going to have to branch out on their own. So I talked about this in an earlier AEW Discussion episode about how maybe it might be time for the JAS to disband. Maybe we're seeing that. Maybe the JAS is kind of just fizzling out. Adam Cole and MJF versus the Butcher and Matt Menard, and pretty much this was another match in that tag team tournament. So after the match, MJF would wish Cole a happy birthday and ended up kicking his face as Cole would get one over on him. MJF, when he is trying to make friends with somebody, he can be pretty he certainly flips a switch and presents a different side of his character, a more comedic side, and when he's trying to buddy up with somebody, it just turns into great stuff, because sure, it's a total con, but it also suggests that at his core he is still just a guy who wants to be liked. But friends he does not have. Friends he will likely not have, mostly because he can be the little worst, and it's only a matter of time before he betrays Cole. But until then, this has been more fun than expected. So Cole and MJF picking up the win and moving on. I don't know if they're on the same side of the bracket as Allin and Cassidy or not, but I'd be very curious to see how far this team goes. And then, MJF turning on Cole most likely. Although there is the possibility that maybe Cole is able to get one over on MJF and turn on him first. Guess we shall see how that one plays out. And then to conclude the show, the main event, Kenny Omega versus Wheeler Yuta. So the booking here had Omega overcoming all of the odds and still pulling off the win. It is a trope that AEW has been wise to avoid for the most part, which is one way that this match stood out. Now, would it have been better for Yuta to win this match, to get a signature win by exploiting the injuries that already existed within Kenny Omega? yeah, I think you can make that argument that yes, Yuta should have won this match. Omega would have been protected in defeat because of that. He's got the injuries. As it stands, Omega picks up a win, getting back on that winning track after losing at Forbidden Door, which was really more of a loss for Kenny Omega on the New Japan side of things because he was defending the IWGP United States Heavyweight Championship, but still was kind of like a loss on an AEW pay-per-view. But nonetheless, back on the winning track, he stuck at the Callis and Takeshita on a night that was otherwise newsworthy for Omega. If there was one thing you could complain about, it was the timing issues with the post-match stuff, which saw the Elite making a save for Omega, only for a Dark Order to show up and pull a chair away from Hangman Page. It's clear AEW is introducing a Dark Order here as like a side story for Page. But it did him no favors here with the booking for them by making them an afterthought in the closing minutes. This was not your typical see what will happen next week finish that builds suspense, but rather one that felt very much like the company had simply mistimed the conclusion of the show. So in conclusion, timing was an issue to close out the show, and going into the show there were two major storylines the show was built around, which was MJF and Adam Cole, and Don Callis and Kenny Omega. So Callis trying to recruit Jericho was a big angle, and it makes sense given the history between Jericho and Omega, and the success Jericho has had against Omega. And it will be interesting moving forward to see if that plays into things at all, or Jericho simply says no and kind of doesn't become a part of it. I think even if he does say no, he probably is going to be a part of it in some way. So Jericho's going to be a part of this feud somehow, some way. Question is how. And it will be, the Cole MJF stuff, good fun, and at least for duration of tournament should make for some fun television. The animosity between them will most likely be ramping up as AEW we're ramping up in time for All In and what should be a championship clash between them for the AEW World Title. The rest of the show featured some solid to good wrestling, highlighting all the top acts and capping things off for the main event. Overall, solid show, but as you can see in the bullet point, timing was an issue to close out the show, which is certainly something the producers are going to have to work on. And with that, we'll go on and wrap up this episode of AEW Discussion. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to hit that like button down below.